is announced and will take place on Friday, October 29th at Little Paddocks at 6:30 p.m. Friends, please accept this, the only intimation.
Today I am reviewing Agatha Christie's A Murder Is Announced, a novel that is significant on several levels. First of all, it is Christie's 50th novel, so it's a milestone for her as a novelist. Second, it brings back one of Christie's favorite detectives, Miss Marple, who's kind of been out of the picture for a few novels. And I think that there are a lot of very interesting themes that are explored in this, and I think this is the first Marple novel that really takes the Marple character to a new level. And we'll explore several of those themes throughout this. The plot of this novel is a very basic one. It involves a small village called Chipping Cleghorn, and so it is it's a rural novel for Christie, which is not unusual for a Marple novel. And it involves this tight-knit small community of people of different ages, and most of the action centers around this house called Little Paddocks, where Letitia Blacklock lives with kind of a hodgepodge of people. She has her companion Dora Bunner, an elderly kind of dithering woman. We have Patrick and Julia, who are two young siblings who are distant cousins of Letitia's, and who are studying at the local school. We also have Philippa Hames, who is a young widow who is working as a gardener at one of the large estates nearby. So you've got this very strange group of people kind of all thrown together. And then you've got some even stranger neighbors. You've got a Colonel Easterbrook and his wife, Mrs. Easterbrook, who's kind of a trophy wife for him. And we have Mrs. Swettenham and Edward Swettenham. And she's an elderly woman, and her son is kind of a young communist. We have Miss Hinchcliffe and Miss Murgatroyd. I think two of the best named characters in Christie's novels. A couple of women who live together. We don't know if they're a lesbian couple. You could make an argument for them being that. They may just be a platonic couple. So you've got all of these very interesting characters, and the whole story centers around the fact that this advertisement was put in the local paper, saying that a murder is announced is going to take place on such and such a date at Little Paddocks, this house, and it'll be at 6:30. And of course, because all of the people are very curious in villages, in these small villages, they want to come see what's going on. And they don't really want to say why they're coming. They don't want to look like, you know, that neighbor who can't resist and has to come and find out. So they come on the pretext of different things. They offer maybe some eggs, or they're out for a stroll and they decided to stop by, or they've got a dog that's going to have puppies, and do you want a puppy? And so everyone's kind of gathering in this house, and finally the vicar's wife, Mrs. Harmon, comes in, and she's kind of a middle-aged woman who can be a little bit silly, but she always kind of says what's exactly on her mind, and she comes in and says, "When's the murder going to begin?" And at 6:30 the lights go out. A masked man with a flashlight comes in, brandishes it about, some shots are fired. Mrs. Blacklock has a grazed ear that starts bleeding. The whole room is in chaos. The lights come on, and the masked gunman has apparently shot himself and is lying dead on the floor. Now, one of the themes that I want to talk about has to do with the fact that we've got this hodgepodge of people at this house, and I failed to also mention that Miss Blacklock also has a refugee maid and cook named Mitzi, who we get the impression that she was probably a victim of Nazi oppression. She may have been Jewish. Her family, it sounds like, were killed in a concentration camp. So she's got these kind of atrocity stories that she's always telling. We don't know how many of them are true, how much she's just trying to kind of play off of the sympathy of Miss Blacklock and the other members of the household. But the fact that we have this group here that isn't an intact family. We don't have the nuclear family with the mother and father and 3 children and servants who've been with them forever. We have 2 spinsters. We have a couple of siblings who are distant relatives. We have this young woman who we don't really know what her connection is with this family. We've got this refugee cook. So post-war England is explored to a great degree in this novel, I think more than her other novels. We see a world that's fragmented. We don't have people coming and bringing letters of recommendation when they come to a village. We don't have people who are old friends of other people. We have people who haven't seen each other in years, people who don't recognize each other, distant relations and cousins, all kind of displaced by the aftermath of the war. So I think that this post-war life is a strong theme. We also see people who don't really have the money to keep things up. And that brings us to another theme, the theme of inheritance. Miss Blacklock is not a rich woman, but she stands to inherit a great fortune if a woman up in Scotland will ever die. And it's this inheritance that the whole plot maybe hinges on, and but it's certainly a motivator for many characters within the plot. So that's another theme. I think another theme is the kind of the dichotomy of youthfulness and aging. We have kind of this hopeful image of younger people in this novel, and we don't see it necessarily from the perspective Christie would have done with like Partners in Crime, where we almost get the sense that she sees herself as tuppence. This is more a mature woman looking at youth and really kind of enjoying the fact that these people kind of represent a hope. Whereas the elderly, including Miss Marple, represent memory. And looking back and thinking about things the way they used to be. And we see this most acutely with Jane Marple, with Letitia Blacklock, and with Dora Bunner. 3 characters who just don't really know how to let go of the past. Miss Marple can move on, and she recognizes that the future must be faced. But the other 2 characters have a little bit of a harder time. We also do see in this one a little bit of racial backlash in a way we haven't seen with Christie before. Mitzi talks about the Aryan race and talks about blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, particularly Mrs. Hames, who she doesn't like. And so we see kind of a different twist. We don't see any longer a character denouncing someone because they are darker-skinned. We see now a little bit of a viewpoint from the other side. Another theme in the novel, women's relationships. We have a lot of pairs of women. Maybe this is considered by Christie another byproduct of the post-war, but we have women who decide to, cohabitate. We've got Miss Blacklock, who's terribly lonely, and so she takes in Dora Bunner. We have Miss Hinchcliffe and Miss Murgatroyd, and Hinchcliffe just hates men. She's a very masculine, tomboyish sort of character, and she's much happier with her companion. We have all sorts of kind of weird families in this thing. But these women's relationships become very important, and Christie, or rather Miss Marple, her character is very astute at looking at these people and seeing how they behave and how these relationships play out. Now, the other thing important in this novel is Marple's development as a character. We get much more of an internal view of this character. Also, we get introduced to another recurring detective character, that's Detective Inspector Craddock, and both Craddock and Marple are very internal, sort of cerebral people, and Christie lets us into their heads a bit. We don't see this kind of fluffy, grandmothery, kind of simple character in Marple. We see someone who's a little bit more quiet, but making very, very astute observations about what she's seeing, and I think that's what makes her such a likable character. Last thing to say about the novel, it explores a weak sense of morality as a motivator for murder rather than pure evil. It can actually be quite a good person who commits murder, but because they've never developed a sense of morality within them or a strong sense, or they're motivated by fear, they act in a way that that goes against established moral standards. Fantastic novel. I give it a 5 out of 5.